Oh my God. You can't even do what you want?
There was a time early on in the Twilight franchise that Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson were forbidden to be lovers. From being forced to miss significant life events to being fired over a small breach of contract, the cast of Twilight had to follow all sorts of strict rules in order to stay with the franchise. Which broken rule resulted in a different actress playing Victoria in the third film?
It's my birthday right now.
The team behind Twilight really considered having Pattinson take on the role of Edward Cullen after he did an audition with Kristen Stewart, where the chemistry could not be ignored. The electricity between the actors was in fact a bit too good. It was so spicy that director Catherine Hardwicke had to remind the actors that the movie rating was PG-13. Sure, there were no sticky situations. Pattinson was told he had to keep his distance from his co-star, especially because she was underage at the time that they met. We all know they didn't stay apart for too long, though.
There was immediate chemistry between the two of you.
Yeah.
One rule Kristen Stewart wasn't a fan of at all was having to wear uncomfortable and visually limiting colored contacts. It was really difficult for the actress to focus while performing since she was having a tough time seeing, but ultimately, she didn't have a choice in the matter. Stewart wasn't the only one, though. Loads of Twilight actors had to endure the same requirement, and none of them enjoyed it. Doing the Twilight films was a full-time commitment, which resulted in actors having to miss some pretty significant life events to be on set instead. Kristen Stewart was forced to skip her own high school graduation ceremony. The filming of Bella's grad scene happened to coincide with Stewart's actual graduation. So, instead of ignoring her own milestone completely, the actress had a mini ceremony on set. An extra was set to shake Stewart's hand while she wore the cap and gown, diploma in hand. All for a mock photo. At least she has a picture, even if it is fake.
This isn't the time to make hard and fast decisions. This is the time to make mistakes.
Ever wonder why Rachelle Lefevre, aka Victoria in the first two Twilight films, was replaced? The actress wound up breaking a pretty important rule and lost her spot in Twilight because of it. The actress had signed on to do 10 days on a movie called Barney's Version, which wound up conflicting with the Twilight schedule. While the actress's contract did allow her to do other short projects, the production company felt they hadn't been given enough notice. The team wasn't able to change the filming schedule to accommodate her by that point, so the actress was replaced by Bryce Dallas Howard.
Well, the circumstances around it had nothing to do with us.
The Bella actress definitely had a rough go on set some days, especially when she was made to wear excruciating hair extensions. While it may have looked good on screen, Stewart wasn't a fan at all. Not being able to refuse the extensions left Stewart with some bad memories. After seeing a photo of herself in the film, her initial thought is really uncomfortable hair extensions. For his role as the dreamy vampire, Robert Pattinson had to learn how to drive. That's right, the actor didn't actually have a license, and he needed to be certified before he could film the driving scenes. The whole ordeal was really rushed, and he wound up taking some crash course driving lessons in Oregon, where filming was taking place, to get that needed license. The rules Nikki Reed had to follow wound up having to change in the middle of the franchise. The actress had to bleach her hair and scalp so she could turn her brunette locks blonde, but the damage was so intense she began losing chunks of hair. This was the point that the hair dyeing rule was dropped, and luckily, Reed's suffering ended when she started wearing a wig from New Moon onwards.
It's not like I got to pick out my
you
wig
don't
or
get to
construct
design your, a lot
No,
of
my
this is
hair
out of
color
your-
changed all the time.
Being part of such a major franchise, the cast had to deal with some very intense fans. The Twihards. In the name of good press and making sure the saga continued to be successful, the actors had to entertain fans and make sure to put their best foot forward, even though they may not have understood the obsession themselves.
People recognizing it as the most bizarre thing.
Pattinson went a step further and actually had dinner with a fan that had been stalking him in Spain. However, it wasn't exactly the dream date she was hoping for. The actor made for a terrible date, complaining about everything he could, and Pattinson never saw or heard from the fan again.
It's very exciting.
When New Moon was first announced, Taylor Lautner's name was nowhere to be seen, as the team wasn't sure he'd suit the role anymore. The actor was meant to be bigger in New Moon, and the team wanted to stay faithful to the books, but unfortunately for Lautner, he wasn't where they needed him to be physically, until the Jacob actor took matters into his own hands. Lautner went on a hardcore bulking mission, eating every 2 hours and working out at least 2 hours 5 days a week in order to gain an impressive 30 pounds.
The biggest thing I learned is that it's just as hard to maintain as it was to put on in the first place.
It didn't matter if the actors were uncomfortable. Filming took place in 2 locations that can get very cold, Oregon and Canada. The actors had no choice but to endure the frighteningly low temperatures and freezing rain. A couple days working in bad weather might not be so bad, but the Twilight actors went through this nightmarish filming experience for a full 4 weeks very early on in the process. Luckily, filming got a bit easier for the performers as things went on.
We're getting pneumonia. That's what we're doing.
Adhering to rules and requirements for Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson started even before the actors secured their roles. The two had to show off their electric chemistry together for director Catherine Hardwicke by getting very intimate and kissing on her bed. Since they didn't officially have the jobs yet, the actors dove right in and even wound up going a bit too far for the camera. This was one rule they definitely didn't mind following. Robert Pattinson brought his broody vibes to the set when filming, but the producers were not feeling them. Pattinson was instructed to tone down the intense and moody vampire vibes. The producers even went so far as to highlight every time the character smiles in the books to prove to him just how much happier he could be. But the actor wasn't going to let it go without a fight.
I got a different color highlighter and highlighted all the time when he frowns and things like that.
Though ultimately, the production wasn't there to play games, so they gave him an ultimatum.
I came back after lunch, I was like, hi!
I'm a smiling vampire.
100%.
There was definitely a lot of fantasy in the Twilight series, but some storylines were confusing for the actors, and even if they didn't agree with the action, they had to stick to it and perform. Kristen Stewart was particularly put off with the way Bella was portrayed once she became a vampire.
They just want to bone. It's the most ridiculous situation.
Pattinson hasn't been so subtle about his distaste for the series either.
When I read it, it seemed like it was a book that wasn't supposed to be published.
In this case, we're on the actor's side. Performing ridiculous storylines is definitely a tough rule to have to follow. Taylor Lautner didn't have a very easy time on set. While he did work extremely hard to attain his peak physique, he didn't anticipate just how much he'd have to be shirtless for the movies. It was an embarrassing and awkward position to be in, but the actor had no choice as it kept being written into the script and highlighted with other lines.
Doesn't he own a shirt?
Looking back to his Harry Potter days, Cedric Diggory had considerably bushier eyebrows than Edward Cullen. The actor had to get his eyebrows plucked and tamed so he looked like the slick vampire he was meant to be, at least for the first 2 movies. The actor wasn't a fan of the look, and by the time Eclipse came out, he got to grow out his brows a bit, rocking a scruffier vibe. Being part of such a major franchise isn't an easy job. But despite some strict rules and intense requirements, the actors totally pulled off their roles. It's hard to believe they weren't always big fans of the storylines with such convincing performances. Which role do you think was most intense?